Following Wrath of Khan had to be tough, so what did they decide to do for the second part of the trilogy?
Okay, to answer that question, we have to cover some drama that was going on and revolved around Leonard Nimoy and Nicholas Meyer. You see, between the cancellation of the animated series and the release of the motion picture, there were legal and financial grievances regarding the use of Nimoy's likeness for Spock-related merchandise sales. That was at least part of the reason Nimoy declined to star in the ill-fated Star Trek Phase 2 TV pilot. Obviously, that got resolved before Phase 2 was converted into the motion picture, but in The Wrath of Khan, it was actually Nicholas Meyer's idea to kill Spock permanently. He was convinced the story's meaningfulness depended on it, but there was a problem. The test audiences that screened Wrath before its release hated Meyer's original ending. Like, it bombed. So the studio said, if we want to keep this franchise going, we're going to have to save Spock. So the ending was changed such that it was possible for Spock to resurrect, which angered Meyer so much he refused to direct the sequel.
Whoa. So where did Nimoy stand on the issue?
At first, he supported Meyer and was ready to be done with Spock, but when he saw the reaction to The Wrath of Khan, he realized that he hadn't fully grasped how much the character meant to so many people. But Paramount had been counting on Meyer's return and were having trouble accepting the fact that they couldn't have both Meyer and Nimoy at the same time. So Nimoy basically told them, let's make a deal. I'll play Spock again on 2 conditions. 1, Harvey Bennett stays on as writer. 2, you let me direct films 3 and 4, completing the trilogy. Paramount didn't have a better idea, so they took the deal.
Okay, so with that settled, how did the story set up Spock's return?
Nimoy and Bennett worked together to flesh out some Vulcan lore by introducing a couple new concepts: the Katra and a ritual called the Faltor Pan. The Katra is essentially the Vulcan equivalent of what humans would consider an immortal soul, but it can only survive the body's death if it's given a suitable host before death, which is done via mind meld. The Faltor Pan was a way of reconciling the Katra back to the host in the event that the body survived somehow.
Oh, so Spock transferred his Katra to McCoy right before he died.
More like copied than transferred, but yeah, the original Katra died with Spock, but the copy survived in McCoy.
But what about the body, though? The body was dead and was put in a torpedo and shot at the Genesis planet, so...
Yeah, we need to talk a bit more about Genesis. One thing I didn't mention before is that Carol Marcus, the founder of Project Genesis, was one of Kirk's former girlfriends. In fact, they had a son together, David Marcus, who actually co-directed the project with his mother. After the Genesis planet was created, David opted to study it under Starfleet supervision by joining a top-secret science team aboard USS Grissom, along with Lieutenant Savick. Long story short, they find that Spock's DNA was essentially repaired and rebooted by the Genesis wave, so his body is alive and tied to the planet in a crazy fast life cycle. David says they both will reach age death in days, maybe hours.
I guess that means Project Genesis failed.
As a terraformation strategy, yes, but if it's introduced to a planet where life already exists, that life gets destroyed. So not only is Genesis just as effective a WMD as ever, that is now, in fact, its only reliable function, which is not lost on a certain Klingon commander named Krug, played by Christopher Lloyd. In fact, Krug is convinced Genesis was always meant to be a Federation weapon, and therefore couldn't care less about its failure as a terraforming agent. He intends to seize all the project data from USS Grissom and use it to produce hundreds of devices so he can destroy the Federation and become High Chancellor of the Klingon Empire.
I see, but what does any of this have to do with Kirk and the Enterprise crew?
That's where it gets really interesting. You see, after returning home from the battle with Khan, Enterprise is so badly damaged that, considering its age and the fact that its captain is dead, Starfleet elects to decommission it rather than refit it. That's a problem because Kirk knows David is on Genesis and wants to return there for a lot of reasons, but Enterprise isn't the only problem. The CNC has also declared the Genesis planet quarantined since the theft and detonation of the Genesis device by Khan has turned the entire project into a political firestorm. Only USS Grissom is exempt from the quarantine, and it's under orders to destroy any other ship that approaches the planet. Normally, that would be the end of it, but then Ambassador Sarek shows up.
Oh, great. Spock's dad, right?
Yep, played by Mark Leonard, who also played him in TOS. And immediately, Kirk can tell something is off about him because Sarek is visibly upset with him. His Vulcan restraint is buckling.
Well, wouldn't you be if your son just died under his command?
That's not it. Remember, Sarek is fully Vulcan and knew about Genesis. He understands and approves of Spock's choice. He doesn't blame Kirk for his death.
Vulcans. Okay, so why is he mad then?
He's smart enough to infer that Spock, knowing his actions would kill him, would have copied his Katra to someone else, but he assumes that person must have been Kirk, since Kirk was the last person to speak with Spock, and that would have meant Kirk knew from carrying the Katra that he had to take it and the body back to Vulcan. But instead, he put the body on Genesis and then returned to Earth. So Sarek's like, what the hell, man? Obviously, his assumption was wrong. The Katra went to McCoy instead, but by the time they figure that out, McCoy's already been arrested for trying to smuggle himself to Genesis to get Spock's body.
Oh, Lord. Okay. What happens to McCoy if the Katra just stays with him?
Permanent insanity, most likely resulting in lifelong institutionalization.
Damn. Well, Kirk's up a creek then, isn't he? I mean, he's got two friends trapped in one body. That body is in jail. Then there's an empty body on a quarantined planet created and guarded by his son.
And don't forget, no ship.
Right. How the hell is he gonna get there?
By stealing the Enterprise.
From space dock? Unrepaired from the battle with Khan? Jeez, that's a level of recklessness that I don't think even Kirk has ever reached before.
Oh yeah, he's risking everything for this. His life, his commission, his legacy, his freedom, his favorite ship, even his closest surviving friends and family. But McCoy and Spock mean too much to him for any other choice to make as much sense.
Wow, does that touch on the themes of this movie? Risk, sacrifice?
Yes, as well as friendship and priorities. And there's also valid ethical concerns in play throughout the trilogy, but especially in this middle installment. Khan rightly felt betrayed by Kirk's negligence to follow up on his promise to check in on the augments every so often, which led to the death of Khan's wife. Krug's grievance is with the Federation as a whole for developing Genesis in the first place. He can't believe the Federation would be naive enough to think no one would use it as a weapon, and so he logically concludes that its primary intention was always destructive, and that the terraforming bit was just propaganda. The whole idea is insulting to him on so many levels. Oh, and then there's the whole philosophical quandary of which is more important, the needs of the individual or the needs of the collective? Because don't forget, it's not just Kirk's ass on the line here. Scotty, Sulu, Uhura, Chekhov, McCoy, even Sarek. They're all risking everything to save Spock and have to confront the question, is this worth what it will cost?
You're right. Damn, this movie is deep.
For real, yeah, but luckily it's not all sober gravity. Nimoy turned out to be a natural at finding the best ways to incorporate comic relief. Seeing McCoy struggle to host Spock's Katra is actually really funny, and it brings out some of the best and saltiest moments in the character's entire history. Also, the sequence where Kirk and company steal the Enterprise is immensely satisfying. Oh, and spoiler alert, you knew it was coming. Enterprise doesn't survive this trip. Its final moments on screen are truly memorable. And in hindsight, it was such a fitting way to say goodbye to such a legendary ship. She went out swinging like mad and kicking all kinds of ass.
Well, this trilogy has been fire so far. I can't wait to see how it wraps up in the fourth film.
Yeah, the voyage home is a treat, man. The only hint I'll give you is that Gene Roddenberry finally got his time travel film, but not in the way you think. I think you'll be surprised. It's pretty special in its own right. Much more lighthearted and humorous.
That sounds perfect. I'm really looking forward to...
Free Willy could never.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?